Hello and welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Today I am the host, not Marius, and this is the first in a series of several episodes where we will be interviewing people about their honors project for the university. The honors projects are just projects that we do, particularly, or at least in computing, as a project for our last year that we do over the span of the year, over 2 semesters. We have Dumitru here with us today to talk about his project. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
And we have Marius as a co-host today.
Well, hi there.
So, Dumitru, do you want to introduce us to what your project was about?
Yeah, so the title of my project was Fitness Logger. It might not be the best title, actually. I'm not good at coming up with names, just like most computing students. But the functionality of it was just to make a workout logger that's actually flexible and that actually can adapt people's needs. Because when it comes to logging workouts, people usually prefer to go on pen and paper because you can build up your own workflow of logging, and they can be very specific, which is why it's kind of hard to actually do that on a mobile phone interface or like anything electronic, right? Because usually you'd build like a form, and then okay, like one person can use that form, but then if another person wants to do something different, they can't really modify the form. So the whole idea was to just make the functionality to have it be flexible enough uh, and flexible enough to actually be able to have a lot of people use it. And the way I did that was just simply by I keep saying simply by simplifying the actual data structure and letting users be able to just make their own workflow, if that makes sense, the same way that they would with like a pen and paper.
So to quickly clarify, I remember using like a habit tracker where I put a tick mark on a day when I exercised. Is it something like that, or do you go more in detail to like what you exercise or something?
You could technically do that as well, but it's mostly where you exercise and resistance values. For example, um, in weightlifting, bodybuilding, powerlifting, like all of these different sports, you'd be doing, say, exercises such as bench press. Um, and then you'd usually want to log things like the amount of reps in a set and the weights used, right? Um, so you'd be logging this kind of stuff. And for a lot of people, this logging can be actually just as simple as, oh, I'm doing X amount of reps and with X amount of weight. Um, but there's a lot of low minuscule details that one might want to be able to log, um, or even the way that you do them. Like for example, a very common thing to do in the gym is supersets, where rather than just doing one set of one exercise, while resting, and then doing another set, and so on and so forth, you would do a set of one exercise, let's say bench press, and then you could superset that with, let's say, pull-ups, right? So then you do like one set of bench press, and without waiting, you do one set of pull-ups, and then you rest, then you go back to bench press, rinse and repeat.
All right.
So that just one example of one of the complexities that can occur, and um, one of the complexities that can occur. So then I was trying to tackle like all of these different minuscule things.
So
Yeah.
somebody using your application as opposed to other ones is actually able to go in and create their own structure of how they want to log their data?
That's the idea. Yeah. So
Okay.
the same way you create your own workflow when you have a pen and paper, is the same way that you would use my application ideally. Um, I didn't fully finish it, so not everything is gonna be working properly. Especially when you look at the application itself that you install on the phone, it's really just a simple application to test the backend to see if it's working, if that makes sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so the whole idea was to simplify the data structure to the point where any user could create their own workflow.
Yeah. Do you
So
think this would
ideally,
be
they could even come up with something that I didn't even think of.
okay? Do you think this would be kind of useful also for maybe personal trainers who could create programs for their clients through the app?
Yes, I was thinking about programs. Okay, so one of the things about most workout apps that I've seen, um, they come with their own programs, and then you follow them, and then you log them. There's one reason why people do that is because when you follow a program, they know the structure and the kind of things that you would want to be logging. So then it's easier to create a logger based on a structured program, right? But that's not really the case when you don't have a predefined structure. So so at first, the main core concept of the application was to just simply log. But and I'm gonna get into that in a little bit. But because of the way I was implementing the backend, I was also thinking that it probably wouldn't be too hard to add another endpoint that will basically be dealing with programs. So then you could like create a program or even a split in terms of, okay, on this day I do these exercises, right? Um, and either create your own or have predefined ones there. Like that technically wouldn't be too hard. Um, yeah. Any
Right.
questions about that before I go into the next bit?
Yeah, the next bit you mentioned the backend there. I'm guessing that's what you want to go on to.
Yes.
That'd be
So to put it in terms of problems, solving problems in a thesis, that was solving problem number one, which was the functionality of the application, which is to log workouts. Problem number two, which I've outlined in my thesis, I don't even know if I can call it a thesis, to be honest, in my report, um,
right.
was to basically use a different architecture for the backend. So for the viewers listeners that might not know much about backend design, you typically just have one application sitting on some server somewhere in the cloud, right? Um, that would listen for connections or listen for different requests, and it will resolve those requests. So it will give you data or modified data or whatever they are. And usually those applications just be one application, whether that is a big one or a small one, depending on how big the project is. However, when they do become big, because many times, especially like if you put in the context of a company, they just keep growing and growing. Sometimes they can get very big and quite hard to handle in terms of scaling and quite hard to handle in terms of code base. And the solution that a lot of companies have started to use in the, I want to say, last 10 years, maybe 15, um, is something called a microservices backend, which is basically splitting that one big application, which in the industry is called a monolith, um, taking that monolith and splitting it into microservices, where instead of having that one monolith deal with, let's say, let's put in the context of, let's say, eBay. Instead of having that monolith deal with the shopping cart, the listings, the user profiles, so on and so forth, you have a microservice dealing separately with a cart or with user accounts or with listings or with orders, right? And that was the problem. Well, not the problem that I was trying to solve because it's already been solved. Like it's a standard thing in the industry, but it's more of a proof of concept that a person that didn't have any prior experience whatsoever, could go into it and learn it and prove that it's actually fairly easy and a good structure, good architecture to use.
Okay. And can you go into how microservices would make scaling easier?
Yeah. So when looking back on monoliths, typically the way they would get, okay, so let's actually go back in time a bit. The way they used to be scaled before is that people would just try to write efficient code. They would they would increase the efficiency of the code. They would add more power to the literal like more literal hardware to the server, whether that is storage or more CPU power or something like that, right? Um, and they would add it to the server, and that would be scaling. Like, oh, we went from being able to support, let's say, 1,000 connections to 10,000 connections, right? Um, that is obviously not the best approach. It's good that they're modifying the code to make it more efficient, but it's not good in terms of you can only go so high and you can only go so far. And also, speaking in terms of business sense, you're basically just paying people to rewrite the same code over and over again rather than making new features, right? Which often is more important. I really don't like that mentality, but is often more important from a business point of view to just write more features and write X features and fix X bugs rather than improving the efficiency of the code. So in terms of scaling monoliths, back back in the olden days, some listeners might get the reference. You basically just improved the efficiency of the code and added more hardware, or rather faster hardware, to the server. Which again is not a bad approach, but it's not. It can only go so high simply because you can only add so much speed to a server. You can only get a certain amount of power out of a CPU and so on and so forth. So the next thing that they started doing in the industry was basically to take that monolith and replicate it. So rather than having one instance of it running, they would have two instances of it running, and three and four and so on, based on the need of it. And that works actually really well. Um, to preface that, they would have all of these instances running, but then have another application on top of that, which would be, it's called a load balancer, which would just redirect traffic to the instances that are running that aren't, let's say, on 100% CPU usage or something along those lines. So yeah, scaling. This is called horizontal scaling, rather than vertical scaling, which is adding more power to a server. Um, so yeah, this is actually not a bad solution, but the thing is, you're still leaving a lot of power on the table. Well, a lot of efficiency on the table because let's say that monolith is a social media platform. So it would have endpoints such as um, profile picture, where you upload the profile picture, but that endpoint would need to do a bit of processing, so it doesn't store the original profile picture, which could be megabytes in size, right? So it would do some conversion to decrease the size and save up on storage. Um, and then there could be another endpoint which would be dealing with, say, user accounts, but that's just simply, oh, let's validate this token, and that's not really computationally intensive. So then, when you do horizontal scaling with a monolith, all of these endpoints get scaled, even though, um, let's say, only the profile picture endpoint really needs scaling, because that's the only endpoint really using up all the CPU. Meanwhile, you have other endpoints like your authentication or a posts endpoint that would get scaled along as well. So it would just be using power for no reason, if that makes sense. And the reason why microservices came around is they started splitting all of these up into separate. They started splitting all of these endpoints into separate programs, which then get scaled if needed. So if you have the authentication endpoint that's not all that demanding, you might have like one instance of it running, whereas the profile pictures endpoint would be, I don't know, let's say 50 of them running, and then there will be a load balancer juggling the weight in between.
Okay. Um, maybe some of the audience shares this with me, that I'm kind of a little bit confused about this. What is the difference between this and just like one part of the application running that is being used more? Say, obviously it's taking up more memory, but like, let's say a certain request is made to the application, right? Then a certain part of the application runs, right? So there's something I'm
Yes, to an
missing here that I'm not
yes, to an
understanding.
extent. The code is still running there in the background. Like when you have a big application, it will just be using up more resources by default. And then when it's getting hit, it will use even more. You're right, but there's still a base level of, okay, now we need to load all of this code into memory,
Mm-hmm.
or now we need to do this other thing, whatever it is,
Okay,
because there's like a lot of layers of um, there's a lot of layers between like literal CPU and code nowadays. So, and not all of those layers are the most efficient. So they will always be doing something.
So
It's
there's just a lot of code that needs to be loaded into memory, a lot of instructions.
yeah. This is only to put it simply, right?
Okay.
There's a lot more to it, and I don't even know 100% how I can explain it. But this is the
Okay.
basic gist of it. At the end of the day, having one small application is better than having one big application in terms of resources.
Okay.
Um, and then you could even put it in terms of startup time. Like one small application will start up way faster than one big application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's easier to do this basically for improving, say, processing efficiency. It's easier to use microservices than to go and try to optimize one application.
Easier in terms of development time or in terms of efficiency? Because in efficiency, yeah, sure. With development time, not really, because it does add the extra complexity in terms of, okay, rather than managing just one project, now we have to manage 10 projects that just happen to be
Okay.
smaller. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that's actually like one of the big drawbacks. A lot of people, and this is actually true of my application as well. A lot of people be like, "Oh, let's do microservices," and then they do microservices, and it just doesn't make sense because their application is small enough that it doesn't need microservices, and it doesn't even need efficient code. um, so like to some extent, yeah, like it's if you're only gonna end up with say like 3 microservices, it's probably gonna be better to just have one bigger application because the difference in size between the microservices and the monolith wouldn't be that big. But then if you put in the context of your Facebook, your eBay, your LinkedIn, your Netflix is a brilliant example. They have like hundreds of microservices running.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be much easier to, in terms of, well, much better in terms of efficiency to have them running as microservices rather than as one monolith. Like, I don't even think that Netflix has such a high load that I don't even think that they could even handle all of this load as as a monolith.
Do you want to move on now to how you feel the university has supported you, or I guess the education that you've gotten for university has helped you with this project, or if it has or not, and how university has supported you throughout the project?
Yeah, sure. That's something that I want to touch on. There's several parts to this. First of all, I'll say that my advisor, Andrew Colby, he's been amazing. It hasn't gotten in my way. It has helped me where I could have used some help. He seems to be a brilliant dude. Um, but overall, I am honestly very disappointed with the way everything's turned out. Um, First of all, I know I could have done way better with the project, but other modules which we're doing for no apparent reason, some of them, honestly, um, during the honors project just got in the way, and I could not focus on my honors project enough. Um, and I feel like that because honors projects literally the thing that gets you the job many times. I know from personal experience, okay, not personal, but secondhand experience, that the honors projects actually get you the job. Um, and I've even spoken to my boss from work. I work in the field now, and I spoke to him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, many times I could be looking at their projects, and most of them are going to be group projects or some other project that they did for a module, but everyone has that same project. So I pay attention to the honors project. That's the most important bit.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I'm like, okay, well, I did research frontiers, and I did graphics, and I did what was the other thing, UX. Yes, they will definitely be useful. 100%. I'm definitely not being sarcastic here.
Right.
So at this point, it's like I would have rather like not done them. I'm okay. I'm not saying they're useless. They have their uses in certain my niche cases, but the thing is, you would think that the honors project, the thing that literally gets you a job, would be way more important.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not able to properly focus on that. I wasn't able to start programming until late December. No, sorry, January even. And then
Okay.
we had from January till end of April. And for an honors project that I had to do a lot of research for because again I had no prior experience with microservices. I wasn't able. I didn't have enough time, and now looking back on it, I know I could have done it 10 times better. All I needed is a bit of headspace, so I don't need to focus on other stuff, and a little bit more time.
So you feel like you would have liked to had the entire 2 semesters just for the project alone, or
That would have been that
or-
would have been that would have been amazing if I did, but even
Right.
in a semester and a half just on the project without our modules, even that would have been really
Okay.
nice, because in the beginning of our semester we had the 3 week what was it called again?
Um, it wasn't agile.
Industrial project.
Industrial project.
Industrial
the
project
industrial.
where we the industrial project where we basically just did, what was it, like a couple of sprints, a couple of agile sprints in like a big 10-man team, which is fair
Mhm.
enough. Like I still don't like it simply because we had the agile stuff before, but whatever. Like,
Yeah.
let's put that
You
aside.
actually,
After that, we can start the honors project and only focus on that.
yeah,
But we didn't.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
So how do you feel over the, I guess, previous 3 years with the modules that you had at university? How do you think it prepared you for
Not at all.
the anything in the industry at all?
Not at all. Granted, some of them could have. Like some parts of networking were actually not bad. Some parts of networking are not bad. Databases was actually quite nice. Ian Murray, shout out to him. I love that teacher. He's the first. I've done databases like 3 times before, and he's the first teacher to actually do it properly. But that's a side tangent. Yeah, so these two modules, and if I remember correctly, algorithms and AI, just only part of that module was useful, which was the algorithms part, because AI was actually quite useless because it wasn't AI. But yeah, like these 3 modules were the only ones that were actually useful to me. Data structures as well, sure. Well, not that they were useful to me, but they were just useful in general. I've already known a lot of the materials taught in those modules prior to doing them. So that's another reason why I'm saying it. Like I've known some of the stuff beforehand, and then combine that with the fact that a lot of the stuff that we did go through just was useless to uh, the industry and useless to my honors project. And at this point, I'm like, I've done 4 years, and the only thing I can show for it was a degree at some paper that says that apparently I can program, even though the paper has nothing to do with my programming abilities.
Right. So do you think there perhaps should have been more practical activities to develop your programming skills rather than, I guess, so much theory and
No, the theory part where we had it, I think, was
yeah.
important at least 80% of the times. And maybe there were some cases here and there where it was a bit too much. But in general, we didn't actually have all that. Like we had a fair amount of practicals, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was with the modules themselves.
Okay.
Like take web development for example, and web development is the biggest job sector in computing, simply
Mhm.
because every company needs web presence, whether that is a website or an application. And I put application in the realm of web development because you're still using that application to contact an API. But I guess you can say web development and mobile development, right?
Right.
So like every company needs something like this. So just about every company will hire web developers or wouldn't like buy a website from someone. Um, so then why not teach us something that would be useful for that? And so far, the only thing that has been useful for that was databases. But
Mhm.
even that was very old school because we're there like learning really badly written Python, which no, sorry, not Python, PHP. Um,
Right.
yeah, and it's just not. Like, I mean, sure, the PHP is still used out there, but it's just not something that the industry actually uses much anymore. And if it is still out there, it's mostly like legacy code.
Yeah,
Um,
it is legacy code, a lot of legacy
yeah,
code that has to be maintained by somebody.
yeah, either
So,
that or WordPress plugins.
yeah.
Um,
That's that too.
But yeah, like there's definitely some useful parts, but they should be strengthened a little bit. And then we would need like an actual backend module that would teach us, like that would just take even something like Java Spring, which is, even though I don't like it, it is a standard in the industry, or uh, whatever the equivalent is on the .NET family of things. I think ASP.NET, I want to say. I'm not even sure. I've never done any proper .NET development.
Yeah, it might be
But
ASP.NET.
yeah. So like either Java Spring or that, or hey, I would welcome it. Even an actual good language like Golang, right? So teach us actual API development along the lines. Teach us a little bit of like unit testing. Teach us how to make some queries, how to do them properly. Teach us how to secure. Teach us authentication. Like all of
Right.
this kind of stuff would be really useful to know. Because I've met like a fair amount. Like as I said before, I knew some of the stuff beforehand, and to me that was secondhand when we did do a little bit of that, um, like through our databases. But I've met people that barely even knew what an API was, or I've met people that don't even know what REST is. REST as in, mm, actually I can't remember what it's. Yeah, I can't remember what it stands for, but REST as in the REST API standard, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I've met a lot of people that don't know these kind of things and don't know how generally you'd structure an API. Don't know how generally you'd make a how you generally make a folder structure and so on and so forth. Um, and it should be taught in university. This is what we're here for. We're here to learn. Another example of a module would be something like CI/CD, CI/CD and general deployment, like learning uh, something like Docker, learning how to set up pipelines in, let's say, GitHub workflow, learning how to set up automatic deployment, learning how to just learning how to just get a virtual private server, go into terminal and install Apache or whatever it is that you want to install, and then deploy some application. Like, and the thing is, sure, you can search online fairly easily if you know how to look, but one, you can easily do it wrong. Two, it's actually kind of hard to find what would be the standard of doing certain things, like how you'd store, let's say, secrets. By secrets, I mean things like passwords. Um, like a lot of people just put in plain text, and to be honest, I do the same, but that's really bad. Um,
Right.
so like learning how to properly manage this kind of stuff. Um,
Would you
yeah.
think that those are kind of maybe job specific stuff? Because the principles of all of these things, I feel like we were taught in information security. Do you think that if somebody makes the
Um,
mistake of storing something as plain text when they shouldn't, is you
no,
can help
the
that
plain
with
text was
more?
just the plain text example was just an example. That's what it was. I
Okay.
mean, just more in generally in terms of how you're supposed to do certain things, or how the industry usually does certain things. Whether that is, oh, this is how you. Okay, so you want to use Docker to deploy your application. Okay, this is how you write a Docker file to package the application. This is how you push it to some registry out there. This is how you pull it. This is how you set up authentication for the registry, so on and so forth. It's like these kind of steps. Like I didn't get into like packaging Docker containers until I want to say last year. Um,
Mm.
Before that, all I was doing is I had a Docker compose.yaml file, and then I would push the code up to the Git repo. Then on my server, I would just do git pull and pull the latest code, and then run Docker compose, and then it will start up the server. But that is, uh, like, sure, it works, but that is a bad way of doing it for
Okay.
many reasons. The proper way of doing is you package the code either locally or on a CI/CD pipeline. You package it into a Docker image, you push it to a Docker registry, and then from the server you have maybe, let's say, a script or whatever to just refresh the images.
Hmm.
And like that's stuff that I had to learn by myself, and it would have been
Okay.
nice if we were like taught some of this. In fact,
Do you
just
feel
Docker in
like
general, like Docker, like me knowing Docker was actually part of the reason why I got the job that I have right now.
Mhm.
Imagine if they started teaching that properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I personally haven't used Docker myself before, but I don't imagine it would take me too long to get started with it and start using it.
Get started
But
with it, yeah, sure.
I feel like and become eventually proficient at it. But if I wanted to, but I feel like university in some ways personally has maybe prepared me to with the skills that I need to be able to go out there and learn for myself. Read,
Right. So what you're saying is the university taught you how to learn by yourself.
perhaps I'm not certain what university has given me, but I know that from comparing myself to the beginning of university to where I am now, I am able to pick things up a lot more easy than in the computing space. I feel like the argument that's often made, and I personally probably identify with it a little bit, is that university gives you the fundamentals and also scratches the fundamentals of computing and computer theory and whatever, and scratches the surface of a lot of different topics in computing, just so that you have some sort of a level of knowledge in them, so you can you understand the topology of computing and the different parts of it. Say somebody goes into there's a web design course and they don't know anything about security. I mean, it's okay, so they should be taught about security, I suppose, if they're doing a web design course and they're going to design websites for people and maybe host them as well. If there's a course, they should probably teach them about security there. I'm not sure. I'm just saying that university I think the purpose of university is really to cover a wide spectrum of topics in the field of computing. That's
Yeah,
just
my main gripe here
perspective.
is the fact that I've wasted 4 years of my life and I've accumulated debt. I didn't even accumulate that much debt. There's people that paid like 17,000 a year, which is sad. But like my main problem is that I've wasted 4 years of my life, and I can say that, oh, I've learned how to learn.
Yeah, well, you
Like it
can't
doesn't take
really.
it doesn't take 4 years to do that. And the things there have been, and even some of the like modules that should be good, they were just not good. But
Yeah,
in
no.
general, I'm saying you're going to university, you're spending all of this time and money rather than building up maybe real skills in real life, or going the internship route or the apprenticeship route and just starting a company at a lower salary and then building up from there, which actually will teach you more. Um, Rather than doing that, you're going to university where it's supposed to teach you all the information you need to get a job, and that's what I've been told in like just about every single open day and anything like that I've been to. And at the end, if I only learned, um, if I didn't like open up any websites and open up any other books about computing outside of university, I I can tell you straight away I would not be fit for work.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I do also feel like it is with university, how much you put in is often how much you get out, and perhaps university should really require a lot more of us over here. It's
That's
supposed to
also
be a
true as well.
full-time degree. I don't really know many people who treated it as a full-time degree as well.
That's
So
you see, that's I agree. It's a full time degree. I agree that it's a full time degree. Yeah, but there's a problem with that. There's just a lot of people that can't afford it. Can't afford not to work, for example.
that's true as well,
Um, but
which
that's
is a
yeah.
problem.
But the
Uh,
main point is like I've met people in fourth year that literally don't even know about GitHub. But no, sorry, not GitHub, Git, or don't know how to use it, or don't even know like proper, like, okay, not proper, but like don't even know the basic Git etiquette of how to do pull requests, how to do this, how to um what the process is, right? And I've literally met them in fourth year in my industrial projects, in my industrial project. Um, and it's like making me question, like, what the hell? How did university let that happen? Like, one, they should be taught, but let's say they're not, and they get fourth year and they're acting this manner, like you shouldn't be here.
mhm.
It Universities are not here to teach you anything. They're here as a business to make money, and they
Oh,
make money by people completing courses.
they're supposed to be making money by providing the value that is supposed to be teaching us, but
Yeah, but it's easier to just, give people papers or nowadays PDFs saying that they've completed some arbitrary course, and then at the end be, like again, it's in their best interest to make people succeed, because if they actually like think about it this way from a business point of view, you could just make it easier and more people succeed, ergo you'll get more money, or the other, should be what should be happening. Keep mumbling. The other option would be to make the courses actually good, actually teach people X, Y, and Z things, and then they actually pass the assignments and the coursework and the whatever. But that's going to cost more money. One, less people are going to graduate. Two, it costs money to redo all of these modules. It costs money to find better staff. It costs money to get better equipment. X, Y, and Z. This costs money. So for them, for like the university as a general, it's easier to just do that. And this doesn't just go for our university. That goes for like all universities out there.
of course,
I'm sure there might be some exceptions. I hope they are, at least. But that's not just my experience. That's even the experience of my sister, who has finished a PhD.
yeah. Well, I think it's going to depend also on different universities, different countries. Perhaps Marius can comment on this of how much more he'd learned when he was away in America.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people who are like really, really hard working, and honestly, I'm just gonna put it out there. I've gotten hired recently, and the job interview asked, "What did you like most from university?" And I just said, "Well, not really. Like, what did you learn, etc." I genuinely said, "Well, haven't really learned like anything." But again, that's like a topic for a different debate. Systems are different, and I did tell them that I haven't worked as hard ever as I did back there in the United States, where obviously the degrees are outrageously expensive. But that is one of the factors why people are working so hard. And yeah, the system is a bit different. They're really grinding. Like, gotta say, it's difficult to like explain it in words, but it's it's difficult. We were required to do assembly programming at the same time, take a low level C course together, like a co-requisite. And then if you wanted to go into operating systems any deeper, to choose that module, you needed to have gone through the low level C module. So it's like a system which is kind of allows you to build up your own, almost your own degree kind of.
That's actually exactly the way I've heard some YouTubers put it. I can't remember what's his name, but I follow some YouTubers that talk about computing and computing career, and that's exactly the way they put it. You can build up your own custom degree.
Yeah, because I feel like all the skills that you outlined, Dumitru, about all the Docker and all that stuff, etc. It sounds like a really good kickstart for a career. But then, if we choose computing science as as a course, and then all we're taught is like web apps, in a way, I feel
I'm
like
not saying all we're taught is web apps. I'm just saying there should be the basics of it. The
yeah,
basics of it done properly, but they're not. And there's a lot of I'm sorry, kind of useless stuff.
yeah.
I feel like we have to draw the line somewhere in terms of like how specific we go in certain domains, like say, web apps. Docker is obviously a huge thing, so perhaps that should be covered.
Just an example, though.
GitHub, most definitely. I mean,
Yeah, GitHub is an issue.
Sorry. Can I please correct both of you? Not GitHub, Git.
Git, yeah.
Correct.
I was going to say
Git
has been
is a
around
problem.
for ages.
Oh my, I have had people asking me, "Can I just email you the code?" I'm like, "No." Like, why?
You've been doing group projects for 3 years. How do you not know at least how to do a Git commit?
Yeah,
Or
like,
Git
come on,
add and
man.
Git commit? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Like people like that shouldn't be able to like pass a year and go into the last year.
Right. Okay. So apart from the fact that GitHub should probably Git Git should probably be a requirement for people to learn how to use, because it's so widely used. It's used by everybody pretty much in the industry. Do you think that perhaps another thing that would help in university is perhaps requiring people or encouraging people to read more on the subjects that they're being taught? I personally have found that when I have read the, say, recommended book along, while following along to the lectures, that has helped me immensely to understand the topics. I don't know what your opinion on that is personally. Do you want to maybe?
Light reading isn't bad. I mean, I honestly don't like it, to be honest, but I can understand the purpose of it and I can see how it can help people. But when people are telling, because you're not the first person to tell me this, and I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, but the university is there to like teach you how to learn," but like when all you're doing is that's useless. I've had
Yeah,
so
I
many
don't think
people
it's
not
all
even.
that's we're doing, but
Yeah, well, for example, in the past year, that was literally it. And I have better examples from people like in biomed and people in engineering that have literally told me that, like, dude, in the past year, I have not learned anything. I was teaching
right.
myself. I mean, no, in the past year, I learned a lot, okay, or learned X amount, but that was all me teaching myself. Yeah, and that was it. Like, rather than actually have proper guidance. And this is not just a COVID problem, because the same people were telling me that that was also true beforehand. It just wasn't as bad because at least there was practicals, or at least there was this other thing and whatever.
Yeah,
But it in my opinion, it should be more like at least 70% they're teaching us, 30% we're teaching ourselves, but more like 80-20 in my opinion. But
Mhm.
it feels like it's 20-80, where 20% they're teaching us, and then we need to learn the other 80% because there's a lot to learn and go through.
Yeah. So where it seems to be going, and this actually want to tie us to another thing where one lecturer told me that they don't want to just copy things, excerpts from book, and put them in the slides for people to go over them in the slides. Instead, they want them to go and read the book, where the purpose of, I don't know, a lecture is to introduce you to the topics, and perhaps labs and seminars are for you to discuss with your peers and the
Yeah, that
lecturer,
goes
the
that
tutor
goes
as
back
well.
again to 2080 and 80-20.
So
That to me seems like 2080, and that
right.
is
So what do
not
you think?
okay.
What do you think they should be doing to teach you? Like how what kind of a method should they
Okay,
be using to teach you?
Dr. Murray's, I think he's a doctor, right? I think
Yeah,
so.
I believe so.
So Dr. Ian Murray, his database module is probably one of the best examples of this. Databases and Sasha's, I can't remember his surname, Sasha's module with security. Those were two very, very good examples of they actually taught us something. And to be honest, I wasn't very good. I don't know, who knows, maybe my IQ isn't high enough to like properly understand the security stuff. But I recognize that that was my own what would you call, my own shortcoming, rather
Right.
than the teacher not teaching properly, because there was a lot of good stuff in there. And
Okay.
to be honest, I even debated going back on all of those materials and redoing the module, um,
Yeah.
because in my opinion it was actually really good. And
That
same with databases. Um, but some are like, oh, here's the beginning of the sentence. Now go and find it yourself in the book. It's like, no, that's not how you should do it. Don't be
right.
lazy.
Perhaps not. Yeah, no, I think this is where we agree here. I think the security module was done brilliantly. I think that was one of the best modules
Hmm.
I'd had, and unfortunately, actually, at the time, I had a lot of motivation as well in myself to follow along like rigorously through the module. So I really enjoyed that one.
Nice.
Um,
I hope I did as well,
but
but didn't turn up the way that way.
yeah, we all have our ups and downs. I had so many times where I was
Yeah.
unmotivated, where I wish I could have taken more from a module, and yeah.
Hmm.
Um, But yeah,
To
glad
quickly, to quickly
Yeah.
add on to my previous point, I'm guessing it's already time to finish at this point. But yeah, to
Yeah, we
quickly
should.
add on to that, it's when I say 80/20, I don't just mean they should teach us everything and all that kind of stuff. Like the supplementary reading that they would give us should be like, okay, if you want to read the same information in different words, I think that's how it should be. Or if you want to read the same information but just a little bit more in depth. So let's say they're teaching us Sasha is a good example. I don't know if he gave us extra reading to do. I don't think he did, but it would have been a good example of it. In the
Sure.
way that he would go through the concepts, whether that is cryptography, symmetric, asymmetric, X, Y, Z. This is how it works, stuff, and he would actually teach us how things work, right? And then he could be okay if you want to do further reading, or if you want to do, let's say, even historical reading, because when it comes to commuting and it's life in general, it's really useful to look back in history and understand how things used to be before, see how it got here, and see why it got here. So it could be like it could be that it could be like, okay, if you want, it would be useful. You could learn X, Y, and Z. Go and read here. Or go and watch this video or this lecture from the X university that posted on YouTube, or who knows, something along those lines, right?
Mhm.
This is the
Yeah, I
kind of
think,
supplementary stuff that should be done, and not go and teach yourself.
yeah, I think Sasha was actually the one that did strongly recommend that we do the reading that he had for us to follow along with the book.
Yeah, I'm lazy with books, so that's probably why I don't remember it.
Yeah, I feel like it just provides a little bit more context that allows you to connect the dots that you for what you get from like the lectures and stuff.
Absolutely,
The,
that's why it should be
the
just a
thing,
bit extra context.
the thing that I find funny though is the idea of revising from lecture slides. There's just not enough information in lecture slides to revise from.
Nope.
So
not enough information in the lecture slides, but no, you can't have a video because they don't want the lectures to be recorded. At least that used to be the case before COVID.
And so I think that's all the time we have for this one. It's been quite a lengthy one, but a really insightful and interesting episode with Dumitru here about all the technological ins and outs of his project, and an unexpected turn. We chatted about expectations and other things of what university has or should have provided us. So it's more of like us reflecting on it and maybe giving some insightful information. I guess that's what the Inside Scoop is about. And thanks again, Dumitru, for coming to talk.
Always happy to be here.
And thanks, Oscar, for leading this one today.
thank you, Marius.
And everyone else, thanks for listening.